There's an animal up north that walks right up to a carcass claimed by a massive grizzly bear, all by itself, and forces the giant to back off without a fight. The same animal calmly crosses 6-lane highways without breaking stride, as if our roads were just another river to cross along the way. It seems like the perfect survivor, a creature with almost nothing to fear on this cold planet. And yet this same animal was recently placed under official federal protection in the United States because it turned out to be genuinely vulnerable. What's bringing down the toughest resident of the icy lands isn't a stronger rival or a hungry predator, but something far quieter and almost invisible to the eye: ordinary melting snow. We'll definitely come back to this strange contradiction at the very end of our story, and by then it'll sound completely different to you. But for now, let's get properly acquainted with the hero of this tale and figure out what it's made of. The wolverine is the largest land member of the big mustelid family, the very same family that includes martens, weasels, and river otters. An adult animal usually weighs between 7 and 18 kilograms, and in sources where weight is given in pounds, you'll find figures from 15 to 40. At first glance, that doesn't sound like much, since some large dog in the yard weighs about the same. But the whole difference lies in how this dense body is built and what feats it's capable of in action. There are two main subspecies of wolverine in nature, and they live at opposite ends of the earth. The first is the Eurasian, stretching in a wide band from Scandinavia across all of Russia all the way to China. The second is the North American, which has settled Canada, Alaska, and the mountains of the western United States. Sometimes scientists also single out a special island form that once lived on Vancouver Island. But wherever the wolverine has settled, you can recognize it by the same traits that unite all animals of this genus. Our hero's main weapon is hidden right inside its mouth. The wolverine has 38 teeth, and among them is one truly remarkable feature. Its upper molars are rotated inward almost 90 degrees, meaning they sit sideways relative to all the others. This isn't some random mistake of nature or a deformity, but the signature mark of the entire mustelid family. It's precisely this clever rotation of the teeth that lets the wolverine do what almost none of its neighbors in the harsh north can manage. It can tear apart frozen meat that turns hard as stone in the bitter cold. It crushes thick bones and gets to the nutritious marrow hidden deep inside, and not every animal can reach that kind of food in winter. But fearsome teeth alone wouldn't be enough for this animal to survive. Their work is constantly backed up by powerful neck and broad shoulder muscles, which give the wolverine its incredible grip and strength for such a modest size. By nature, this animal is omnivorous and ready to eat almost anything that comes its way, and its truly bottomless appetite has long earned it a reputation as a real glutton. This appetite is so firmly woven into legend that it's even reflected in its nicknames. For the sharp, unpleasant smell it uses to mark the boundaries of its territory, the wolverine has been dubbed the skunk bear, and in the French part of Canada, it has its own distinctive name, carcajou. Now it's time to figure out where you can actually encounter this tough animal. The wolverine is a truly northern creature, and scientists describe its range as circumpolar, meaning it forms a single broad ring around the top of the planet, around the pole. Today, thousands of these animals live in Canada and Alaska, where there's still enough wild open space, silence, and saving cold for them. But it wasn't always this way, and the history of its range holds plenty of remarkable pages. The wolverine once wandered much farther south than you might think today. In the Rocky Mountains, it reached all the way to New Mexico, and in sunny California, its tracks led into the Sierra Nevada, the very places we don't associate at all with this harsh lover of snow. As for the North Cascades in Washington state, the wolverine only managed to timidly return there in the 1990s, after long years of complete absence from those mountains. And here's what seems truly astonishing in this whole picture, if you stop and think about it. Before us is an animal with teeth that can crush bones, with muscles that let it drive bears off their prey, with a dense body seemingly designed on purpose for the cruelest winter frosts. It looks like a creature that nature painstakingly assembled to survive in exactly those places where almost everything else dies. It seems like such a born fighter simply can't have any weak spots. And yet you and I already know that it does have one, and it's hiding nowhere near where you'd expect it. It's not a rival's fangs or the sharp claws of a larger predator that genuinely threaten this iron beast today. To finally understand where the main answer is hidden, we first need to thoroughly figure out how the wolverine actually lives day to day. We need to see how it hunts, how it gets its food during the most bitter and hungry months, how it raises its young right in the snow, and why its whole life is so tightly bound to the cold. We'll talk about all of this in detail, and about the important secret hidden behind its main strength in the next part of our story. To truly understand the wolverine, you should start with what's on its plate, because food shapes its entire life from the first day to the last. This animal isn't picky at all, and takes whatever the harsh land offers in any season. In summer and the warm months, the wolverine hunts all sorts of small wildlife found in its territory. Water voles, plump beavers, nimble hares, quick squirrels, and unwary birds all end up on the menu. But when the chance arises, this modestly sized hunter goes after far larger game than you'd expect. It can take down a deer, a moose, a caribou, and even a bighorn sheep, especially if the prey is weakened, wounded, or bogged down in deep snow. In winter, when life gets truly hard, the wolverine switches to carrion and feeds on what's left over from other animals' feasts. It calmly finishes what wolves, bears, and hunters have left behind, picking up scraps left by luckier neighbors. And it doesn't consider it beneath itself to pull someone else's catch right out of traps set by humans, which sometimes seriously annoys trappers. This is where its loud reputation is born, and that reputation rests not on empty tales, but on verified observations by scientists. Researchers have repeatedly documented the truly incredible moment when a wolverine drives a grizzly or an entire wolf pack off a carcass and takes the prey for itself alone. An animal weighing less than 18 kilograms simply chased a massive bear away from its rightful meal. Here it's important to understand one subtle point, so we don't slip into a pretty exaggeration. The bear backs off not because it's truly afraid of this small, brazen creature and couldn't handle it in a fair fight. It's just that in that moment, the large predator soberly weighs the pros and cons and decides that a fight with such a furious and stubborn neighbor would cost it too much. It's much easier to walk away and look for food elsewhere than to tangle with something that won't back down for anything in the world. This astonishing tenacity rests on physical endurance that any marathon runner would envy. A wolverine can cover up to 40 miles in a single day. That's about 65 kilometers, and still not look the least bit worn out. Scientists once documented a truly astonishing case in which the animal climbed roughly 5,000 feet straight up, right up the mountainside in the dead of winter, and pulled it off in less than 2 hours. To grasp what that means, just picture the height of a decent mountain pass, which it conquered at a run through deep snowdrifts without a single break. What helps it on these wanderings isn't sharp eyesight, because the wolverine actually sees rather poorly and doesn't rely much on the world around it visually. Its hearing, however, and especially its sense of smell, work absolutely superbly, and it's the nose that guides this animal through life. It can sniff out hidden food, even under a thick layer of dense snow, and head straight for it through the white silence without ever missing the mark. And here we come to one of the cleverest traits in its behavior, a trait that explains a great deal about its fate. The wolverine knows how to store food for later, and it does so with remarkable calculation. When it takes more than it can eat in one sitting, It doesn't leave the surplus behind, but hides the heavy chunks of meat in the snow or wedges them deep under cold stones. And this is where things get really interesting, because snow works for it as a genuine natural refrigerator. The bitter frost gently preserves the hidden meat for weeks and months, keeping it from spoiling, and holds this precious cache safe until the hungriest and harshest times. When not a crumb of food is left anywhere around, the wolverine returns to its hiding places and calmly rides out the very stretch of time when many other animals simply starve to death. Remember this detail about snow as a refrigerator, because very soon it will turn out to be the key to our entire story. Snow is also closely tied to the most tender side of the wolverine's life, the side that has to do with raising young. When the time comes to bring up offspring, the female makes herself a den deep in the snow, digging out an entire system of hidden tunnels and a warm snow chamber. There, in that white cradle, the cubs are born, usually 2 or 3 of them. The little ones spend the first weeks of their lives in the natal den in complete safety and warmth, securely sheltered from the cold and from prying eyes. They leave this snowy cradle around the middle of March, once they've grown a bit and gained strength. The mother nurses them with her milk for about 9 or 10 weeks, patiently raising a new generation of hunters. At the same time, the wolverine breeds extremely reluctantly and doesn't produce young anywhere near every year, and in the wild, it usually doesn't live to see 15. All of this makes every cub that comes into the world genuinely precious for the future of the entire species. This powerful animal also has an unexpected weakness worth mentioning on its own, because it explains a great deal about its difficult relationship with people. Despite its formidable reputation and its ability to drive off bears, the wolverine tolerates the presence of strangers on its land surprisingly poorly. Scientists have conducted studies and uncovered a curious fact about its behavior. It turns out that these animals begin avoiding even the very best, the richest feeding grounds in their territory if people suddenly start showing up there. All it takes is a ski track cut through its domain, a snowshoe trail packed down, or noisy snowmobiles set loose, and the wolverine walks away from these places. It's as if it gives up its own well-stocked home simply because a restless 2-legged guest has started turning up too often and prefers to go hungry off to the side rather than face the disturbance. And now, having gotten to know our hero a little better, pause for a moment and ask yourself this. Have you ever, even once in your life, seen a wolverine with your own eyes, even just in a photograph or a wildlife film? And before this story, did you know that the main defense and main support of this iron animal isn't its fangs or its strength at all, but the most ordinary snow under its paws? It seems as if a mighty predator and a fragile snowdrift can't possibly have anything in common, and yet it's snow that holds up its whole life. What this delicate, almost invisible bond has led to, how the wolverine's fate has turned out alongside humans, and why its future today hangs by a thread, we'll talk about in the final third part of our story. The history of relations between the wolverine and humans began not with care and protection at all, but with a long and brutal feud. In the early 20th century, this animal was hunted down mercilessly across nearly the whole of its vast range, and this happened for 2 reasons at once. On one hand, it was taken for its valuable fur, with no sense of limit and no rules at all, since the trade in those days knew no restrictions. On the other hand, people back then were running outright campaigns to wipe out every predator across the board, viewing them as unconditional pests that had to be rooted out completely. The wolverine took this double blow and began to vanish from places where it had lived for centuries. In the state of Colorado, the last animal was seen in 1919, after which the wolverine disappeared from those mountains for decades to come, as if it had never been there at all. But among the many nameless losses, there's one animal in this story whose name is worth remembering, because its fate became truly legendary. Scientists know it by the code name M56, and its journey still staggers the imagination of researchers. This male was caught and tagged by scientists not far from Grand Teton in 2008, and the very next year, in 2009, it set off on an incredible trek. Over the course of its journey, it covered roughly 585 miles through wild and dangerous country. Along its long path, it crossed 1 interstate, 3 federal highways, and 5 state highways, never once veering off its chosen course. And at the end of this path, it accomplished something hard to believe, because it became the first documented wolverine in Colorado since that very year of 1919. For nearly a whole century, those mountains hadn't seen such an animal, and then one stubborn traveler brought it back. Unfortunately, this beautiful story had a sad ending, one that says a great deal about how hard the wolverine's life is alongside people. Scientists tracked the fate of M56 all the way until 2012, carefully gathering data about its life. And in 2016, it was shot by a ranch hand in North Dakota, and that death too went down in history in the saddest possible way. The thing is, the slain animal turned out to be the first wolverine in that state in nearly 150 years. An animal that had covered an enormous distance and survived what almost no other creature could perish at human hands barely after announcing its return. The hard fate of individual animals eventually led to major changes in the law. On November 29, 2023, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service officially designated the wolverine in the contiguous states as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. This decision didn't come easily and was the result of a long and dogged fight. It was preceded by more than 20 years of persistent campaigning on the animal's behalf and a full 6 rounds of court battles before the matter finally moved forward. By the time of this decision, only about 300 wolverines remained in the lower 48 states, and that's an alarmingly small number for such an enormous expanse. It's worth noting that the new protection didn't extend to Alaska, where the animal lives much more freely, and soon after protection came an important step toward a true return of the animal to its lost lands. On May 21, 2024, Colorado Governor Polis signed a special law numbered SB 2471. With this decision, Colorado became the first state to firmly commit to bringing the wolverine back to its territory under a carefully thought-out plan. The plan calls for releasing 30 females and 15 males into the wild over 3 years to give the species a chance to take hold once again in these mountains. And so the state, which lost the wolverine more than a century ago, has decided to right an old wrong with its own hands. And now we finally come to the very heart of our story, to the mystery that started all of this in the first place. Remember that detail about snow, which serves the wolverine as both a refrigerator and a cradle for its young? It's precisely this tight bond with snow that has turned out to be its greatest weakness in a changing world. The animal's entire life hinges on deep snow, without which a female simply has nowhere to make a safe den for her offspring. According to estimates from the service, suitable wolverine habitat may shrink by nearly a third, by 31%, as early as the year 2045. And by 2085, losses could reach as much as 63%, meaning most of what the animal has today. That's exactly why Colorado was chosen for the wolverine's return, since its high mountains should hold on to that life-saving snow far longer and more reliably than the lower ridges of the northern Rockies and the Cascades. A fair question arises. How can anyone even study an animal so rare and so reluctant to cross paths with people? Scientists found a clever way around this problem. In the winters of 2016 and 2017, researchers from 4 states at once, namely Idaho, Montana, Washington, and Wyoming, joined forces. They set out camera traps and special hair snares across the backcountry to collect fur for DNA analysis, and altogether they ended up with 185 such stations. In the end, wolverines were detected at 59 sites out of 183, meaning roughly 1 in 3. And again, it's worth pausing and asking yourself honestly, did you ever think that the greatest threat to such a mighty animal comes not from its enemies, not from bears, and not from wolves, but creeps in quietly along with the melting snow? Surprisingly, the wolverine has left its mark not only in the wild, but also in human culture. That very traveler, M56, was jokingly nicknamed the other Wolverine, a nod to the famous comic book hero Logan and his indestructible nature. And Governor Polis himself, when announcing the new law, also playfully riffed on that superhero image, mentioning adamantium and the superpowers from the movies. But he immediately corrected himself with a smile and reminded everyone that we're talking about a real, living animal weighing just 15 to 40 pounds, and not some made-up strongman from the screen. And so the circle we began our story with closes. Before us stands an animal that drives grizzlies off their kills and crosses 6-lane highways. Yet what brings it down isn't the strength of a rival, but ordinary melting snow. And the main takeaway turns out to be unexpectedly quiet. What ultimately saves the most invincible animal of the North is, in the end, neither its ferocity nor its fangs, but one thing alone: whether there will still be cold beneath its paws, and whether there will be enough open, untouched space around it.